Mr. Trudeau, in your campaign platform there is a section titled Preventing Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. In it you talk about how it's mostly women experiencing domestic violence, that there is a low reporting and low conviction rate. You call it gender violence. And you say that no one fleeing domestic violence should have nowhere to go. All of these are wrong to varying degrees. Now, the only reason the statement no one fleeing domestic violence should be left without a place to go is even in this video is because of how the government is taking it. They are giving somewhere between 36.9 and 79% of the victims of domestic violence upwards of 97% of the shelters. Now this is blatantly unfair, and if it was the other way around, it would be decried as sexist, and Trudeau would probably be vowing to change it and fix it in his campaign. Now, the mostly women experiencing domestic violence is even more incorrect, because, well, yes, if you look at the police-reported domestic violence, it is 79% women, but some researchers went through the results from the Canadian General Social Survey on Victimization from 2014, and they found that it was more men than women experiencing domestic violence. That study will be linked below, of course. The Canadian Association for Equality cites various reasons as to why the discrepancy between the police-reported data and the General Social Survey data. Most of it having to be with problems with police reporting. Now, you mention low reporting and low conviction rates. Now, in order to increase the conviction rate, typically what happens is you increase the false conviction rate, which does nothing. Now, to respond to the low reporting rates, perhaps you could increase the trust that male victims have in the police, since male victims are underrepresented in reporting statistics. Again, according to the Canadian Association for Equality, male victims were more likely to report dissatisfaction with the police, and, in addition to that, quote, in many instances, unquote, the male victims find themselves arrested as perpetrators rather than as victims. Now, on the Liberal website, you refer to it as gender violence, and if my previous points haven't sufficiently debunked that in and of themselves, perhaps the following will. Homosexuals, while representing 3% of the Canadian population, make up 18% of the police-reported cases of domestic violence. In addition to that, the gender breakdown of the homosexual cases is much more equitable, with a 55-45 split. And related to that, homosexual women have a significantly higher victimization rate than their heterosexual counterparts. And combining that with some other data, my brother was able to calculate a homosexual and heterosexual victimization rate. The homosexual men getting 5.49% and the heterosexual men getting 4.83%, respectively. Now, I tried to calculate what the proportion of overall victims were lesbian, but I could not find a number that would tell me how many women were lesbian, which was, as far as I could tell, necessary. At least not one that made sense with the amount of homosexual and bisexual people in Canada. So, what takeaways can we have from all this research that you've done? Nobody asks. Well, we can take away that men need shelters. We can take away that any ad campaign that's going to be going against domestic violence should be targeted at the homosexual community, and more specifically should be targeted at lesbians. We can take away that the police departments need to work to make their reporting more in line with the self-reported surveys. And we can take away that the police departments themselves might have a bias in terms of domestic violence. Now, what can you, Mr. Trudeau, take away from this? Well, you can take away that not everything is the fault of men, that not everything breaks down to gendered lines, that everything has some nuance to it, and that not everything has an ideological answer.